Example, I came in as a prime minister, and my wife made the recommendation that we have a prime minister's ball in order to be able to raise funds. And we raised over $65,000 for the Upton Grove School. How many times have you heard of the National Trust having a ball or a fundraising event? And again, this is not an all-out slot on National Trust. The same thing can apply to many of the different entities that we're supporting and sponsoring. And I'm asking everybody to take this thing seriously. If you have assets, as the trust does, why aren't they developing them? Let's look at another entity, Sufer Development Foundation, who also have been given a patrimony of St. Lucia in the form of the Sulphur Springs. Does the government of St. Lucia provide any subvention to the Sufer Development Foundation? The Sufer Development Foundation just recently took over the Piton Trail and have made an incredible success of it. What assets does the trust have that I can look at and say, okay, the capacity is within the trust to develop these things, and they're generating their own revenue?
As it relates to the proposed sovereign fund for the CIP program, can you give us some more details as opposed to just the lending of the investors?
Sure. There are 4 companies that are putting in bids to be able to manage the fund. So the sovereign fund, in legal terms, acts like a trust. So in essence, it's owned by the people of St. Lucia, but we're going to put it into a trust and allow a third party to be able to manage that trust in terms of how the money is going to be invested. The funds that are going to be coming from the sale of the CIP programs will go into the sovereign fund. There are some projects in which the funds will go directly into those projects based on those projects bringing people to the table. So once the applications are going through the CIP, so let's understand the role of everybody. You have a bunch of promoters and marketing people and developers who are all responsible for identifying potential clients. Once those clients are identified, the application goes through the Citizenship by Investment unit. So the CIP unit is exclusively responsible for the approval of anybody who's made an application. Once the application is completed, the person then transfers the funds into the Citizenship by Investment unit. The unit maintains 20% of those funds in order to pay for marketing and to sustain itself. The rest of the money goes into what's called an economic development fund. It is the intention of our government that instead of the money going into a fund which has no regulations in it, to put it into a sovereign fund which will be highly regulated, and it will not be under the control of the Prime Minister or the Cabinet to make the decisions as to where that money is invested.
Okay, so you are saying this sovereign fund is replacing the previous fund that was already established?
It will be an additional fund with the intention that all the monies that we get will go into that fund.
Okay, so will these funds be working side by side, or what is the process like?
When you say working by side by side?
The previous fund for helping to improve the country for investment, I guess that's the same thing that sovereign fund is doing.
That's not true. The economic development fund that was established is only a bank account. The former government did not put any regulations or any guidelines to that fund.
Sir, tomorrow, second session of Parliament will be opening. There's a report that the minister is resigning because of take up the post of deputy. So what will you say to this? And is there any truth?
Well, we have to wait till tomorrow. I don't want to take away all the suspense.
So have you solved the issue of deputy, because they have...
Our government solved the problem of the deputy long ago.
As it relates to the CAP again, we've seen countries with the program implemented seen a decline in numbers recently. How does this augur for our own CIP program, and does this fund actually help to, I don't know, more or less urge people into our country as well?
Well, the CIP funds that have been in existence the monies have been predominantly used to help pay off debt. So I know in the case of Antigua, particularly in the case of St. Kitts, certainly has been the case of Grenada, maybe a little bit less in the case of Grenada, but it has stimulated investment. And that is what the CIP programs predominantly were designed to do. After the recession, there was no monies to be able to help get private sector investments off the ground. Okay, the former government waited until it's almost last year to be able to implement CIP. prior to that time, there was no investors coming to the table. None. The CIP now has encouraged people because now investors are seeing that there's an opportunity to get assistance in getting their project off the ground. They don't mind bringing money to the table, but they don't have 100% of the money. And we've seen that banks have been reluctant to lend monies in projects at this point until they can see a turnaround. So the CIP was a way of doing that, and it has successfully done that. The question is, how do you manage the CIP process? So the allegations by some people that we've jeopardized the CIP program, we have not. The only thing that we changed was the price. But the actual processing of the candidates has remained the same. In fact, has gotten even more stringent in that we have regional security forces that are now participating in that overall approval process. So, and we will continue to do best practices in the world in order to make sure that we are as vigilant as possible to make sure we get the right people coming to St. Lucia. I touched it.
Mr. I have a question. I'm going to change the topic a little bit. I want to find